been watching the events in North Africa and the Middle East over the last few months with a lot of interest, because it's a classic example of how people use new technologies as a tool. Things like Twitter don't make revolutions, people do, and politics do, and economics do. But it's fascinating how the new media platforms are being used by people both to communicate the politics about the revolution or the uprisings, but also for people to try and understand what's going on. So people in the West, if you like, trying to be aware of what's happening in those places. And that's happening in a unique way because of the unprecedented technologies that we have there. There's nothing entirely new about the idea of mainstream journalists using citizen journalism material. We are getting used to that, but the pace and volume of the production of this kind of material means that it is now integral, it's automatic, it's used instantly and extensively by all news organisations, public and private. It's become part of the storytelling process, and that means that everyone from Sky to Al Jazeera doesn't just use it accidentally, it's now built into news gathering, it's built into what correspondents do. Social media is an extraordinary and very exciting source of material and voices. It gives us material that we just would not be able to access otherwise. It tells us stuff that we didn't know. But in the excitement of this new source, we have to still realise that it has to be validated, it has to be put in perspective, it has to be put in proportion. And so while we are fascinated and we are incorporating this into our coverage, it is, in that sense, it's like any other source or series of sources. The one has to be aware of its provenance and aware of any kind of bias or perspective that it brings with it. I think with such an extraordinary, unprecedented series of events, it's incredibly difficult for the international news media to understand entirely and instantly what's going on. No one else did, so why would the journalists? And the speed and the rapidity both of the events and of the news cycle and news process at the moment makes it even harder. In some ways, social media makes that picture more complex, but I also think that it adds diversity, and it adds a kind of context of real people talking about what's going on that can only help in that explanatory process. But at the same time, it's the job of the journalists in that situation of a rapidly evolving process of events, for them to seek to validate what's going on, to verify the sources, and attempt constantly to provide some kind of context, some kind of perspective, and also the critical questions.